can't admit he's done anything wrong. He's backed into such a corner now, and his reasoning for doing it. It was awful what happened on October 7th, and it's been awful what's happened since. And it's very difficult for us sitting in a radio studio to put ourselves into the position that he and his people feel. But at the same time, I don't believe going to war with other world leaders is necessarily going to help him.
Britain obviously has been a staunch ally of Israel for many, many years, not least in the wake of October the 7th. But clearly there is a feeling now in Downing Street that Israel have gone too far, that what is happening in Gaza now is beyond the pale. And this is the response from Benjamin Netanyahu, absolutely coruscating. I mean, those comments are going to require some sort of response, obviously, from Keir Starmer. There needs to be very carefully chosen words, I think, try and dial down the rhetoric here, because, you know, as you say, John, there are very serious accusations that Benjamin Netanyahu is saying, effectively placing Britain, Canada and France on the side of Hamas, which is, you know, a real ramping up of the rhetoric.
I mean, there is no dispute, is there, among decent people, that the crimes of Hamas on October the 7th were beyond description. It was an abomination. It was murderous. It was foul. No dispute about that. And now we hear this from Benjamin Netanyahu. To be clear, there is a very wide current of opinion that says that Benjamin Netanyahu is using this war in Gaza, the onslaught in Gaza, as a means of prolonging his grip on power in Israel. It's an ugly allegation. It's now very, very widely held. And now when you hear what was said by the Israeli Prime Minister this evening, he is deepening and poisoning the line between Israel and its former friends as well, including this country, Canada, France, who have been staunch friends of Israel from the very beginning. Keir Starmer got into a lot of political trouble at the beginning of this conflict by siding some of his own side thought far too clearly and unambiguously with Israel. And now look at what's happening. And what can you say about that? The relationship between Israel and so many of its former friends now is getting into a very, very dark place.
And I think that's the problem, is that the way that Israel, the way that really Netanyahu has been behaving is to sort of say you have to choose that if you criticize what I am doing, that means you're siding with the other side, and that's what he's making this into, rather than recognizing that maybe his reaction now is going too far. He will not sort of take any of that criticism on board, and instead saying that if you criticize me, you are therefore siding with Hamas, which is clearly not the case. That is not the case in terms of the stance that many have taken around the world. Many have probably been trying to still defend the actions that Israel have taken for probably longer than they maybe felt comfortable doing so. But it's clear that he's not listening to any reason on this whatsoever. And therefore he's sort of launching these attacks now at other world leaders to suggest that the fact that they are lining up to suggest that perhaps this is too far now, more should be done to help the people in Gaza, which is people care about the fact that there are innocent people in the middle of all this. It is a really ugly conflict. It is something that has tortured the region for decades. I mean, it is a really awful thing that we're seeing played out, and actually, I mean, we're not even seeing it fully played out because of the fact that you can't get journalists into the area. So, you know, there has been this incredibly difficult situation that people have found themselves in, but it is now becoming a sort of, I'm going to just attack you to sort of deflect from what I'm doing, rather than getting to any sort of sense of I guess any admission of he can't take the blame. He can't admit he's done anything wrong. He's backed into such a corner now, and his reasoning for doing it. It was awful what happened on October 7th, and it's been awful what's happened since. And it's very difficult for us sitting in a radio studio to put ourselves into the position that he and his people feel. But at the same time, I don't believe going to war with other world leaders is necessarily going to help him.
Yeah, and it's
or his people.
And it's difficult. I don't think any of us have got it in us. I've heard no one who claims they have an answer to the problem of Gaza. How do you find a way through that? What is the end point of this? What we are doing here now is calling up what we think is clearly wrong, arguments that are clearly fallacious. And I think it's reasonable enough to do that. As for the next bit, the difficult bit, what on earth do you do to try and sort this thing out? Well, it's just in a deep fog. Our listener, James, thank you, James, for writing, and James Thomas, if Israel doesn't destroy Hamas, says James, then Hamas will continue to control Gaza and threaten and attack Israel. There is no other way. And there are many people, James, who would agree with you on that. But against that, last night I was listening to another live broadcast from Benjamin Netanyahu, where he was effectively saying that Hamas had been destroyed, had been neutralised as a force. I mean, they are still there. When we see hostages released on the occasions that happens, we see Hamas fighters with their masks carrying arms. They're still present. That's not to say they're necessarily anything like the kind of presence or force that they were before. And might it not be possible, a question, not an answer to the question, to move past the ceasefire to some sort of way where you're at least looking for constructive steps instead of simply carrying on with the bombing and the killing? No,
but I mean, Hamas have been crystal clear that the first chance they get, they want to commit another October the 7th and another. So you can absolutely see why Israel are taking the stance that they are. It's the way in which they are approaching it and the extent to which they are pursuing their military objectives, I think, which is worrying so many world leaders. What is interesting, I think, is that we've yet to really hear from Donald Trump what he thinks about this. I think that could be significant. Were he to come out and not necessarily side with Britain and France and Canada, but just criticise, no matter how mildly, what Israel are doing, that could make Netanyahu potentially rethink his strategy. But as for now, it doesn't look as if he's prepared to do that. Yeah, I mean, again, as in the case of Ukraine, we keep shifting our focus from the Middle East to Europe and over to the United States, because these things are just so interlinked now in just about any conversation. As in Ukraine and with Russia, Donald Trump in America is the only single power capable of making a significant difference. If anyone can, it has to be Donald Trump. And we wait to see when it comes to Gaza. He is someone that Benjamin Netanyahu, you'd think he would have to listen if Donald Trump speaks. And if he's speaking, it's not in a tone that we can hear here. So again, we're watching. If anything, on another big question in the same region, Iran. We're hearing now that Donald Trump, he's just again today saying that he thinks he's getting further in progress in talks with and about Iran. Meanwhile, Benjamin Netanyahu was saying again just last night, he said, look, he hopes for some sort of agreement on Iran's nuclear program, but failing that, Israel will act in its own self-defense. Now, I don't know what an attack on Iran by Israel without American collaboration even looks like. The weaponry needed, the technology needed, let alone the political leave to do that. That's a whole other complicated question. But maybe, are those leaders even in step now? I mean, who knows? Again, it's a bit of a fog.
Well, and it does. I mean, this murder of this young couple was in DC. It's, if there was a reason for Trump to sort of really make a significant intervention, you would get that straight away. And I think the challenge now is that too many of these, it feels like lots of world leaders have got lots of their own stuff to be dealing with, and how they're all interacting and how they're influencing each other, goodness only knows. But we really do need peace in that region.
Let's speak now to Dan Arbel, a former Israeli diplomat to the US who's in Washington.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening, Dan. Well, firstly, this must be a very difficult day for you. These weren't just colleagues, they weren't colleagues of yours, but it must be absolutely devastating to hear this.
Absolutely. It strikes close to home. I served at the Israeli embassy in Washington twice over the years and know the embassy quite well. And when such a thing happens in the capital of the United States, involving embassy staff, this is tragic. It's unprecedented, and it's very, very concerning.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. I wonder, have you ever feared for your own safety working on the job as an Israeli diplomat around the world? You have a very long career, I think over 20, 25 years as a diplomat. Have you ever feared for your well-being?
So, thank God as an Israeli diplomat, you're accustomed to kind of being very much on the lookout and being aware and taking the necessary precautions. And definitely there are times when there's more concern than others, but thank God I've not encountered any attacks on me personally or on my colleagues, but colleagues in the foreign ministry of Israel and the diplomatic service have been targets over the years, and some have been paid the dearest price with their lives.
Mm-hmm. Will you be taking increased security measures as Netanyahu advised? Are you doing anything yourself?
I'm in a suburban Washington community, and I'm being more on the lookout, of course, in terms of the Jewish Community Center, which we attend, or the synagogue, the neighborhood synagogue, which we go to. So obviously there's increased security everywhere right now around Jewish institutions, and I personally will definitely be more alert and watchful.
Mm-hmm. There's been increased criticism of Israel in the past few days from European countries over the intensified military campaign and the aid blockade in Gaza. This was clearly, I think, what the Israeli government was referring to by toxic anti-Semitic incitement. Do you think that's a fair comment from Netanyahu there?
I think that anti-Semitism has been in general on the rise in recent years, and perhaps more so after October 7th, 2023. The Anti-Defamation League, which monitors anti-Semitism incidents around the world, and especially in the United States, points in its last report to a spike in anti-Semitic incidents, in pro-Palestinian, anti-Jewish, and anti-Israel incidents in very high percentage numbers. And so the writing was on the wall, and there have been 9 plots against Jewish, Zionist, Israel-related were stopped in the States just since July 2024. But there has been a rise in violent anti-Semitic activities. There has been a spike in incitement and in vandalism, and so certainly this is not disconnected from what we've been seeing in recent years. But such an event, such a tragic outcome, this has never happened before.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sure we would all condemn these attacks, and certainly, as you say, 9 plots since last year. That's quite something in America. But surely people should be allowed to criticize the Israeli government for its operations in Gaza. It can't be anti-Semitic to simply criticize a government, can it?
Look, it's there's a thin line here between what's criticism and freedom of speech, and there are certain lines which you don't cross. But certainly the environment that was created in recent years, very vicious anti-Israel rhetoric, has led to a rise in incidents and is endangering lives, and is definitely leading to very, very tragic incidents. So yes, of course, Israel can be criticized. Israel is not beyond criticism, and I do believe that everybody has the right to criticize Israel. But there comes a point when this line is crossed in terms of calling for action, or making statements that can lead to violent actions against Jews and Israelis and Zionists.
Understood. That's Dan Arbel, the former Israeli diplomat to the US. Thank you very much indeed, Dan, for sparing your time to come on the program tonight.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Have a good evening.